They tell you Stonehenge is a solved mystery. Ancient calendar, burial ground, temple to the sun, close the book. But here's what they don't mention. 5,000 years after the first stone went into the ground, 12 questions remain that no scientist can definitively answer. Stones from Scotland, 750 kilometers away before the wheel existed. 300 tons of rock vanished without trace. Bodies cremated in Welsh forests, then carried 220 kilometers to be buried. An altar stone that matches no geology in southern Britain. And acoustic properties that amplify human voices by 5 decibels, but only inside the circle. These aren't theories, these are measurements, dates, chemical signatures, physical evidence sitting on Salisbury Plain defying explanation. If you value documented archaeological and geological history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Nature Journal published August 2024, tracing the altar stone to the Orcadian Basin via uranium lead dating of mineral grains between 1,000 to 2,000 million years old, and scientific reports from August 2018 showing strontium isotope ratios in cremated bones, proving 40% of 25 individuals analyzed spent their final decade in Western Britain, not Salisbury Plain. Now back to the information. Anthony Clark at Curtin University runs uranium lead dating on mineral grains from the altar stone. The results point to the Orcadian Basin, northeast Scotland, 750 kilometers from Stonehenge. The stone weighs 6 tons. It's 5 meters long, 50 centimeters thick, sandstone, red-gray, and its mineral fingerprint, thorium, zirconium, specific age ranges of 1,000 to 2,000 million years with younger grains at 4, 150 million years, matches bedrock in Caithness, Orkney, the Moray Firth region, not Wales, not southern England, Scotland. The journey from northeast Scotland to Salisbury Plain crosses mountain ranges, rivers, forests so dense you couldn't see sky. By sea, the route hugs a coastline exposed to Atlantic storms. By land, you're dragging 6 tons through terrain that would break a modern logging road. The stone had to move. Either a sea voyage of over 1,000 kilometers around the northern coast of Scotland, then down the Irish Sea and Bristol Channel, or an overland haul crossing the Scottish Highlands, the Pennines, then south through what's now the Midlands. Both routes impossible by accident. Both routes requiring organization that implies political coordination across Britain. He suggests the altar stone represents unification. Different tribes bringing their sacred geology to one site, a monument to collective identity. But here's the problem. No archaeological evidence exists for that level of political structure in 3000 BC Britain. No trade routes documented, no artifacts showing contact between northeast Scotland and Salisbury Plain during the late Neolithic. Just the stone itself, 6 tons, 750 kilometers, sitting there. Blue stones from Wales, 240 kilometers west. Stonehenge pulled material from every direction. Why? Hawley recovers pieces of at least 58 individuals, men, women, children, all cremated, all placed carefully in the ground between 3100 BC and 2600 BC, 500 years of burials. Then, in 1935, archaeologists rebury everything in Aubrey Hole 7 without proper analysis. He recovers skull fragments, bone pieces from 25 individuals. He sends them to Christophe Snoek at Vrije Universiteit, Brussels. Snoek runs strontium isotope analysis. Strontium gets absorbed into bone from diet, plants, water, animals that ate plants. Different geology means different strontium ratios. You can fingerprint where someone lived their final decade. 10 of the 25, 40%, did not spend their last years near Stonehenge. The strontium ratios match Western Britain, most likely West Wales, the Preseli Hills, the same region where the blue stones were quarried, the same 240-kilometer distance. The carbon signature in these bones indicates dense woodland, oak, ash, elm, the kind of forest that existed in Wales, not the open chalkland around Stonehenge in 2800 BC. Some of these people were cremated in Wales. Then their remains were carried to Stonehenge for burial. Stonehenge in its early phases. The blue stones were quarried around 3000 BC. Craig, Rosie-Phelan, Carn, Godog, both in the Preseli Hills. Radiocarbon dating from excavations in 2015 confirms quarrying activity 3400 BC at Craig Rose I Phelan, 3200 BC at Carn Godog. The cremations at Stonehenge date to the same period. You have cremations in Welsh forests. You have a 240-kilometer journey to bury the dead at a site that was simultaneously being built with Welsh stones. What pulled them there? The 10 individuals came from different generations based on radiocarbon dates spread across 500 years. This wasn't one migration. This was repeated, sustained movement over centuries. One cemetery, one destination, Salisbury Plain. Why there and nowhere else? But if you reconstruct the monument as originally built, 30 sarsen uprights in the outer circle, 30 lintels capping them, 5 trilithons in the center, 2 stone circles of blue stones, various station stones, the heel stone, the slaughter stone. You need approximately 157 stones, maybe more. Estimated original weight, 981 tons. 981 minus 681 equals 300 tons. Missing. Sarsen stones, 13, 17, 18, 20. Expected in the outer circle based on parch marks that appeared during the dry summer of 2013. The grass grew thin in perfect circles where stone holes should be. Susan Graney, English Heritage. Quote from the journal Antiquity: "If these stone holes actually held upright stones, then we've got a complete circle." In the 19th century, tourists chiseled off souvenir chunks, but 300 tons. That's not souvenirs. That's systematic removal. Sarsen used in its construction. Theory 2. The stones were converted into tools. Sarsen makes excellent querns for grinding grain. Archaeological surveys north of Stonehenge found evidence of Bronze Age settlement around 1500 BC with quern fragments and broken sarsen, but not enough to account for 300 tons. The missing elements existed only in the plan, never in reality. Mike Pitts, archaeologist who excavated at Stonehenge in the 1970s, he suggests the monument remained unfinished because moving sarsens from West Woods 25 kilometers north was so difficult that builders gave up partway through. But the parch marks say otherwise. Stone holes existed. Something stood in them, then vanished. If you transported that much rock out of the site, you'd leave traces. Sledge marks, track depressions, cart ruts after the Bronze Age when wheels appeared in Britain. Nothing. The stones exist in old drawings and surveys, then they don't. An entire third of Stonehenge erased, and archaeology cannot tell you how or when or where it went. The acoustic properties inside the circle amplify voices by 4 to 6 decibels, but no one knows if this was intentional. 100 years ago, he places the model in an anechoic chamber. Then he tests sound. The placement of stones creates acoustic isolation. The gaps between stones are too small to let sound escape, but large enough to create thousands of reflections bouncing horizontally around the interior. No roof means sound should dissipate upward. Instead, it stays trapped at ground level where people would gather. Stonehenge. The monument aligns with the summer and winter solstice. The heel stone frames the midsummer sunrise. The avenue, parallel banks, and ditches connecting Stonehenge to the River Avon follows the solstice axis. Astronomical alignment clearly mattered, but once the builders erected the stones and heard the acoustics, did they adjust the design? Quote from Science News: "Sound must have been one of the fundamental experiences of Stonehenge. In Neolithic Britain, most people lived in open landscapes, forests, plains, river valleys. Enclosed stone structures were rare. The acoustic effect inside Stonehenge, voices amplified, sounds reverberating, noise from outside muted, would have been unlike anything most people had ever experienced. The closest analogy would be entering a cave. But caves are dark, cold, unpredictable. Stonehenge offered controlled acoustics and open daylight." Till experimented at the Maryhill Stonehenge replica in Washington State. Using reconstructed Neolithic percussion instruments tuned to the space, he made the monument resonate. The stones sang. More careful shaping, more attention. This is the side where the solstice sun rises, also where sound would reflect most clearly to someone standing at the center facing the heel stone. Coincidence or intention, no one can prove it either way. They weigh between 2 and 5 tons, made of spotted dolerite, unspotted dolerite, rhyolite, volcanic ash. They came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, 240 kilometers from Stonehenge, 80 stones originally. Today, 43 remain in various states. Many are damaged, chips missing, flakes removed, gouges and scrapes. Tourists in the 19th and early 20th centuries chiseled off pieces for souvenirs. But archaeological excavations have found bluestone fragments and layers dating to the Neolithic and Bronze Age. Someone was removing pieces of the bluestones thousands of years ago, deliberately, at the monument itself. They find bluestone debris, hammer marks on some of the surviving stones, evidence of working that doesn't match the original shaping done when the stones were first erected. The damage post-dates construction. It's not tooling for fit, it's removal after installation. They chipped off fragments to create amulets, talismans, portable pieces of the sacred stones. Evidence? Skeletal analysis of human remains buried around Stonehenge shows high rates of trauma and disease, healed fractures, deformities, signs of infection. More than you'd expect in a random population. Wainwright and Darville suggest Stonehenge functioned as a prehistoric Lourdes, a pilgrimage site for the sick. The bluestones sat near healing springs in Wales. The quarry sites at Craig Rosifallen and Carn Godog are close to water sources traditionally associated with healing in later Welsh folklore. If the bluestones carried that association, transporting them to Stonehenge would transfer the healing power to Salisbury Plain. People would travel long distances to access that power, and taking a piece of the stone home would extend the benefit. No definitive evidence proves this. The high trauma rates in burials could reflect something else. Stonehenge is a war memorial for those killed in conflict, a monument to the dead from multiple communities who died violently and were honored collectively, or a cemetery for elite individuals who lived dangerous lives, hunters, warriors, builders who suffered occupational injuries. The bluestone chipping could be functional, creating smaller stones for tools, reshaping them for different configurations, breaking them during attempts to move or rearrange them within the circle over centuries of use. The stones have marks. The fragments exist in the ground. The explanation is missing. The next begins in 2025, first half of the year. But the station stones, 4 markers placed at the corners of a rectangle around the outer edge of the ditch, align with something else, the moon. But the long sides point to the lunar standstill positions. When the moon reaches its maximum northern and southern rise and set points, it aligns with these stones. So, how this was achieved and what might have been its purpose? Within and around the monument, over the full 18.6-year cycle to confirm whether the alignment is meaningful or coincidental. She states observing the connection firsthand may offer new insight into how the monument was designed. The stones themselves might reveal their purpose when the moon finally returns to its extreme positions. A calendar system tracking both solar and lunar events to predict eclipses, agricultural timing, ritual dates, or it could be accidental. A rectangle is a simple geometric shape. Place 4 stones at corners in some astronomical alignment is statistically likely. The lunar standstill happens to fit. Decades to complete. They would have needed multiple generations of knowledge passed down, records kept, understanding that watching the moon over years would reveal a pattern. Then they encoded that pattern in stone. Permanent, monumental, waiting 5,000 years for us to notice. David Nash, University of Brighton, leads a team analyzing the sarsen stones. Using geochemical fingerprinting, measuring 22 trace elements including thorium, zirconium, chromium, they match 50 of the 52 remaining sarsens to West Woods in the Marlborough Downs, 25 kilometers north of Stonehenge. But 2 stones don't match, Stone 26 and Stone 160. They came from somewhere else. Nash tests them against 20 different sarsen sites across southern England. No match. He compares them to each other. They don't match each other either. 2 separate sources, both unknown. One fragment matches Monkton Down, a different site in the same general region but slightly southeast. Another fragment matches sarsen from East Sussex, 76 miles southeast, not near Stonehenge, not near the Marlborough Downs, East Sussex. Or it could be from a missing stone, one of the 30 or more sarsens no longer at the site. Or it could be a hammerstone, a tool brought to Stonehenge for ceremonial or practical purposes. The study cannot determine which. And 2 of those locations remain unidentified despite testing samples from across southern England. The stones exist, their chemistry is measured, the source is missing. Stone 26 and Stone 160 occupy unique positions in the sarsen structure. Maybe their geology, shape, hardness, workability suited those spots better than Westwood sarsen, or maybe they were already at the site. Glacial erratics deposited during the Ice Age, found locally, incorporated into the design because moving them short distances was easier than quarrying new stones 25 kilometers away. But glacial erratics should show weathering from exposure over hundreds of thousands of years. Rounded edges, surface erosion. The Newall boulder, a piece of bluestone found at Stonehenge in 1924, has been studied for exactly this question. Does it show glacial weathering or human quarrying? The debate continues. If the sarsens include glacial erratics alongside quarried stones, the construction story becomes more complex. Nature and human effort combined. One of the trelithons had fallen. Archaeologists raise it back into position. During the work, they find cracks in Stone 56, one of the upright stones. To reinforce it, they drill 3 holes through the stone and insert metal rods. The drilling produces 3 cylindrical cores. Samples from deep inside the stone, 108 centimeters long, 2.5 centimeters diameter. Robert Phillips, an employee at Van Mops, the diamond cutting company doing the work, keeps one of the cores. He takes it home, displays it in his office. When he emigrates to the United States, the core travels with him. Richmond, New York, Chicago, Aventura, Florida. 60 years later, on the eve of his 90th birthday, Phillips decides to return the core to English heritage. 2019. His sons deliver it to Heather Seabeer, the Stonehenge curator. But more than that, Nash notices something unexpected. The core shows voids, empty spaces inside the stone. Not large, millimeters to centimeters, but present, pockets where the silkrete didn't fully solidify during formation. But it raises questions about the stone's structural integrity. If the sarsens have hollow pockets inside, they're weaker than solid rock. The builders at Stonehenge had to account for this. They had to test the stones, identify weak spots, position them so the voids didn't compromise stability, them vulnerable to stress. The lintels on top added weight. Thousands of years of weathering expanded and contracted the rock. Eventually, the weak points gave out. The other two cores drilled in 1958 are missing. No one knows where they went. Phillips' core is the only one returned. If the other cores showed similar voids, it would confirm the pattern. If they showed solid interiors, it would suggest variation between stones. Without the other cores, we have one sample, one look inside one sarsen. It shows voids. We don't know if that's typical or exceptional. We don't know if the builders knew about the voids when they selected and shaped the stones. The core exists. The voids exist. The explanation for how this affected construction is missing. The heel stone stands outside the main circle, northeast of the sarsen ring, beside the end of the avenue, 4.9 meters above ground, roughly textured, unshaped. It leans inward toward the stone circle at an angle of approximately 29 degrees from vertical. It weighs 30 tons. It's the largest single stone at Stonehenge, and unlike every other sarsen, it was never worked. No hammer marks, no dressing, no joints carved to fit lintels. It stands as it was found, both stones marking the solstice axis together. The uprights in the outer circle were dressed to be rectangular. The lintels were curved to follow the arc of the circle. The trilithons were finished smooth on their inner faces. The joints, mortise holes, and tenons were carefully carved, but the heel stone, rough, natural, as if the builders considered it sacred in its original form, or as if they intended to work it but never did. The origin is unclear. Some suggest it refers to a legend that the devil threw the stone at a monk, hitting him on the heel. Others suggest it's a corruption of Helios, the Greek sun god, or from the Welsh word hall, meaning sun, or simply from its position heeling, leaning toward the circle. The avenue is an earthwork, parallel banks and ditches, that connects Stonehenge to the river Avon 2.8 kilometers northeast. Recent excavations show the avenue follows natural periglacial stripes in the ground, ridges and gullies created by glaciation. These natural features align with the solstice axis, so the builders may have chosen to build Stonehenge at this location because the land itself already pointed to the midsummer sunrise. If that's true, the heel stone could be a marker placed on a natural alignment, a stone set where the land and sky converge. Not shaped because it's not part of the constructed monument, it's part of the landscape. But it weighs 30 tons. Moving it to this spot, even if it came from nearby, required significant effort. Why move it if it's meant to look natural? The results show it extends deep underground, deeper than the other sarsens. It may be naturally standing, a geological feature that was already vertical or near vertical, incorporated into the monument without needing to be raised. Or it was partially buried intentionally, anchored more firmly because its position outside the circle made it vulnerable to toppling. The heel stone weighs 30 tons, stands alone, marks the sun, and no one knows why it was left rough. Inside, archaeologists have found evidence of a massive Neolithic settlement. Timber circles, houses, feasting debris, thousands of people living there around 2500 BC. At the same time, the sarsen stones were being erected at Stonehenge. This is enormous for Neolithic Britain. Most settlements had a few dozen people, 100 at most. 4,000 is a city, and it appeared suddenly, existed for a short time, maybe a few decades, then was abandoned. The Midlands. People traveled to Durrington walls bringing pigs, feasting, then returning home. The bone assemblages show the pigs were slaughtered and consumed on site. Many bones had meat still attached when they were discarded, indicating abundance, waste, more food than needed. At the same time when Stonehenge aligns with the setting sun. Parker Pearson's theory. Durrington walls was the domain of the living, timber, temporary, decaying like human life. Stonehenge was the domain of the dead, stone, permanent, eternal like ancestors. The two sites were connected by the avenue and the river Avon. A ritual landscape, living and dead separated by distance but linked by ceremony. The timber circles at Durrington walls mirror the stone circles at Stonehenge. Same diameter, same orientation, as if the two monuments were paired, one for the living to gather during midwinter feasts, one for the dead to be honored during the same season. The avenue connects them, a processional route. People would walk from Durrington walls to Stonehenge carrying cremated remains, offerings, memories of the deceased. Why 4,000 people? Neolithic Britain had a population estimated between 100,000 to 150,000 total. Gathering 4,000 in one place represents a significant fraction of the entire population. Organizing that many people, feeding them, housing them, coordinating the construction work at Stonehenge happening simultaneously. This requires logistics that shouldn't exist in a society without centralized authority. Together then disperse. The avenue follows natural glacial features, but was built by humans, and no one knows if the alignment was intentional or coincidental. The final stretch approaches the Avon at West Amesbury. This discovery suggests the Neolithic builders chose this location because the land itself already pointed to the midsummer sunrise. They didn't impose the alignment, they recognized it. The avenue follows the natural features. The banks run along the ridges. The ditches are dug into the gullies. Minimal earth moving required. The landscape guides the route. The ditches were deepened. The route was marked and used for centuries. Artifacts along the avenue show repeated foot traffic, pottery, stone tools, evidence of processions or ceremonies. The avenue was not just a natural feature noticed and named, it was modified and utilized. Or did they choose the site for other reasons? Proximity to the River Avon, the existing henge earthwork from 3000 BC, the availability of good land, and the solstice alignment was coincidental. If they chose the site for other reasons and noticed the alignment later, Stonehenge becomes an act of adaptation. They incorporated the natural features into their design, enhancing what was already there. Number 12. 3 stone cores were drilled from Stonehenge in 1958 and 2 are still missing. The returned core has been invaluable. Nash used it to fingerprint the sarsens to West Woods, to understand the stone's internal structure, to measure trace elements that identify source geology. Without that core, the 2020 study, tracing 50 sarsens to the Marlborough Downs, would have been impossible. One core, one piece of data. It unlocked an entire mystery. The other 2 could confirm whether Stone 56 is typical or unique among the sarsens, whether other stones have similar voids inside, whether the geochemical fingerprint of West Woods appears consistently across the monument or varies. 2 more samples, 2 more pieces of the puzzle missing. Anyone who knows what happened to the cores, contact stonehenge.core@englishheritage.org, UK. So far, nothing. The cores could be in someone's garage, displayed on a shelf, thrown away decades ago, lost in storage, anywhere. From a monument 5,000 years old. If they exist, they hold data, answers, context. If they don't exist, that data is gone forever. You can't re-drill Stonehenge. The stones are protected. What was removed in 1958 was the only chance to sample the interior without damage. The people who know their location are silent or dead. The cores themselves, if they survived, sit in darkness, unrecognized, unreturned. 1 core returned after 6 decades. 2 still missing. 2024. The altar stone traced to Scotland, 750 kilometers away. Chemical fingerprint confirmed. Transport method unknown. 2025. The lunar standstill begins. Scientists prepare to observe Stonehenge during the moon's extreme positions for the first time with modern instruments, to test whether the station stones were aligned deliberately or by chance. Not because we lack technology, because the people who built it left no writing, no explanations, no maps, just stones, bones, chemistry, and silence. 2024. Richard Bevins publishes the Orcadian Basin connection for the altar stone. 95% certainty. The stone came from northeast Scotland, but the route it took, sea or land, remains unknown. Both routes are nearly impossible without technologies that didn't exist. Both routes happened anyway. Mineral grains dated to 2 billion years old. Acoustic measurements and scale models, parch marks and grass. Every mystery is backed by peer-reviewed research, journal articles, university studies, and every mystery ends the same way. We know what. We don't know how or why. Modified over centuries to maintain and enhance the design. It was important, sacred, central, worth the cost. But the mind that conceived it, the belief system that drove it, the organizational structure that built it, those are lost. The stones remain. The meaning is missing. Buried 2,000 years after Stonehenge was first built. Isotope analysis shows the teenager grew up near the Mediterranean Sea. Metal tools found in the grave suggest he was a craftsman. He traveled over 2,000 kilometers to reach Salisbury Plain. Then he died and was buried within sight of Stonehenge. Why he came, what Stonehenge meant to someone from so far away, so many centuries after its construction. Another question without answer.